Welcome back to the Distracted Driving Podcast. I am Sean Genovese, and in again for Rex Williams is our friend Eric Leonard James.
Hey everybody, it's great to be back on again. Rex, thanks for taking vacation so I could be here in front of a microphone. It's one of my most favorite places to be.
Yeah, because like me, LJ enjoys the sound of his own voice.
Yes, it's true. It's true, especially when I use the deep tones like this one.
Which actually is a topic that we're going to explore a little bit further in our conversation. It's going to be in episode 12 before we get to that. This is episode 11, though, and the conversation, first of all, we get to talk to Rick. He didn't get to say a lot in the last episode, so you get to find out.
We saved the best for last.
You get to find out what Rick does. And actually, we talk a little bit in this episode about some things that happened after we graduated, but before everybody got a job. And one of the stories that is not told, I will tell right now, we were all unemployed. You'll make a reference to it, I think, in
Sure.
this episode about the economy was still rebounding from 9/11, basically.
Yep.
When we graduated. So I actually graduated from engineering school and did what every engineer tends to do. I went to Lugano, Switzerland for the summer and was a camp counselor for 6 to 10-year-old children.
Sure. As one does after graduating.
As one does with an engineering degree. So, you know, that delayed my search a little bit because I was distracted, if you will, by my summer plans. So much so that it was the topic of a third of the book that I wrote about my experience overseas with those kids. But then I came back in around September, and like you guys, I was looking for a job. And I think it was March of the following year before I actually got hired. And you and Amanda both remind me in this episode that we were all kind of in the same boat and apparently helping each other.
Yeah. No, it was kind of cool. I mean, I knew my story and I knew your story, but I didn't know about Amanda and didn't really know Rick's story either. So it was just funny that we all kind of followed that same path early on.
Yeah, I mean, we were the human version of LinkedIn.
That's right. Before it was cool.
Well, okay, this is another great conversation with 4 longtime friends that all happen to be industrial engineers. It's going to start off with Eric taking over the podcast, so it's appropriate that you're here to do the preamble.
I had some thoughts that I wanted to, or rather questions that I wanted to know a little bit more about, you know.
Yeah, and like Brian Brooks tried to change the title of Distracted Driving, I think you're trying to change us from a podcast to something different, which we'll let the listeners learn about.
Nice little tease. I like that.
All right, it's episode 11. Enjoy. I don't want to make the same mistake I made before. Does anybody here have any questions for Eric? Would anybody like to play host?
Could I add 2 cents real quick? I'd like to say that
You're going to ask yourself a question?
I'm going to ask myself a question. Eric, how do you feel like being on the podcast? Well, it's been great so far. Thank you, Eric.
Did you say podcast?
I did.
No more Jameson for you.
No, I did want to say that, speaking of connections and people that are willing to testify isn't the right word, but people that are willing to kind of back you up or say good things about you. I do want to say that when after I graduated from college, I was looking for work for a little bit. We were in a little bit of an economic downturn, and so jobs weren't always there. And I do have to say that our very own Mr. Genovese, he was working for that major airline manufacturer, and he put in a good word for me with his supervisor, and I had an opportunity to go interview with his supervisor, and if I hadn't already committed to my job with York, there's an alternate timeline somewhere where me and Mr. Genovese were working together building airplanes.
Boy, that would be an interesting alternate timeline. Um, I actually I did not remember that. Did I know that you interviewed
So I never actually interviewed
or you were offered
with
an interview?
you. You, to your credit, kind of created an opportunity for me, but by the time it kind of came to fruition, I had already
I
signed
gotcha.
my offer letter. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who say, "Well, why did that stop you?" It's like, well, I was young and naive at the time.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Well, let's go back to the part where that was awfully good of me.
It was, kudos,
I
kudos to you,
actually
sir.
interviewed there too.
Tip of the cap and a tip of the Jameson to you.
Ah, thank you, sir.
Do you-
You interviewed with the large aerospace conglomerate as well, as a result of me or independent of me?
I think you had told me about it. I don't know. Mm,
Well, listen, if you don't remember, it's my show. We're
All
gonna say
right,
it was because of
totally
me.
because of you. You're so generous.
That's I think worth noting is the power of networking, and that this was what you just described, Eric, was long before LinkedIn was invented. Monster obviously was there, and I just checked, by the way, it still exists. It's not that much of a, well, it might be a
Oh,
relic,
goodness.
but it's a relic that's still out there. Um,
Write that down,
no, that
kids.
was that was before LinkedIn, and so that was like good old fashioned networking. But now it's even more profound because you can go on LinkedIn, type in somebody's name or the name of a company, and find out who you know there, or who you know that knows somebody that's there. But it's still, I find I've changed jobs. We were just talking about this the other night. I don't have the exact count, but it's got to be probably 8 or 9 times. I've only changed companies a couple of times, but as I look back, they were all a result of relationships that were built and networks that I had. And apparently, it started, over years ago. So that's great. All right, Rick, I'm gonna take you off mute, but you got a lot of background noise, man.
I still do.
We're gonna let you play. We're gonna let you play. I think it's because you're on the computer microphone. It's just a lot of ambient hiss. But as long as you're talking, it should be fine. Tell us what you do.
Thank you so much.
I know what you do, but nobody else does.
Well, the short history of it all is we all graduated from Cal Poly and walked out in front of the dirty building with the green tables and chairs and stood out there, and we walked away, and I came up to the Bay Area and worked at UPS. So they hired me as an industrial engineer. They paired me up with a guy who knew the streets really well, and I knew how to run a computer and do IE stuff, and we just IE'd all the UPS routes in the whole Bay Area. It was crazy. I mean, these guys, they said, all right, so we have to pull them for production, so you're going to work from 10 p.m. till like 6 a.m. So go. I'm like, all right. So we went in these, and Oakland, San Ramon, all these different facilities, and relayed out the way the drivers drive the routes, optimize them, always making right-hand turns. Like, we had to take a huge map and just lay out, if you're going to deliver a package at every house for this entire neighborhood, how would you do it? So all over.
Was that Were you part of the, was that the management trainee program, or were you hired as literally an industrial engineer?
That was the management training program. Yep,
Gotcha.
yep. So I got interviewed at IBM. They said no. UPS took me. Thank God. I did 2 years with them, and they just ran me through the ringer. And they were like, "You know what? Thank you for your information. Have a nice life." So it was crushing at the moment, but looking back, I'm so glad I escaped UPS in that environment because it was tough. So, what do I do?
Yeah, where'd you escape to?
Looked around. I had a friend. I
This is where it gets good.
We're all leaning in.
I was going to go work at Paved Stone, a brick. So I guess, all right, a brick company, laying like selling bricks. So I got a job with these guys, worked for them for like 4 months, and Monster probably, I'm guessing, dumping my resume out. A random medical device company calls me up. They're like, "Hey, we're looking for an engineer, IE, Cal Poly. Yep, come on in. You're hired." Right out, 2 years out of college, medical device, going into a highly regulated industry, and love it. It's awesome.
I feel like he skipped over a few parts. Okay, so you went to work for, first of all, yeah, the products, some of the products that the medical devices that you've worked with, I know are fascinating. We won't, it's not a medical device podcast. We won't dive into all of those. But could you describe, because I know you kind of recently, I think you got a promotion. Um, so same kind of question to you. You've answered part of it. All right. We know you started at UPS. You didn't stay there. Then you went to medical device. But now you've been in med device for a while, and you've kind of found a niche and progressed. So was that intentional? And if so, why? And how? What was the key to being able to be successful there?
Well, I mean, the first company I worked for and going in there and seeing that we can actually save lives was a fantastic feeling. Every product that I helped the production team build was potentially life saving. So it was the first, I would say, going to a startup. So you're doing all the different jobs. I was procurement. I did all purchasing. I did all the production planning. I was the production line lead supervisor. I mean, janitor, the whole thing. It was fantastic. And the boss I had at the time was just brilliant. I mean, I just absorbed information from him. And it's about being compliant. I mean, Sean, you know that. You're aerospace, so you know that you gotta have your ducks.
Retired
Okay.
aerospace.
I got 20.
Could I ask a little question here, Rick? What, like, can you give us just a feel? You don't necessarily have to give us straight numbers, but could you kind of give us a feel for what are your tolerances? Because I've got to think that you've got some pretty stringent tolerances, kind of what you're saying. Can you give us an idea like what that is?
Yeah, I mean, on a typical part, you'll have CTQs, critical quality checks, that are within plus or minus 5 thousandths. So 0.00, 0.05, 0.005, 5 thousandths of an inch. And their machining tolerances, they're general. We do them on plastic injection molded parts. It's across the board. on very large components, they'll be 15 to 25 thou tolerances.
And if you have something that, God forbid, ever fell out of tolerance and still made it out into consumption, like what would be the ramifications of that?
So, in the medical device industry, it's really crazy. So we order 1,000 parts. They come, we buy them. This machine shop just machined up all these parts to our specs. They come in, they're received, they go to incoming quality inspection. Quality inspection says, all right, from this batch, we're going to take 52 parts, and we're going to do all of the critical to quality dimensions on all these parts. And us as engineers, we have to define those. Like where are things interfacing? You know, where is it critical that we meet an exact specification? So our incoming quality team, they have all these, you know, it's like a $3 million lab of equipment to sit there and inspect all this stuff for us. And they go, well, the guy's out by 0.2 of 1/1000th of an inch. Non-conformance report. You're done.
And now that's all 1,000 from the
Yeah.
lot?
The whole lot hung up.
Wow.
All non-conforming. So it's all. Do you guys remember the statistics classes we took?
Yeah.
It just
I mean, the parts I haven't blocked out.
hits me every day. Sample size. What's the population? Da, 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 da. Yes. Yeah. That's so.
Meanwhile, Eric's out there with a tape measure, going. This is about 24, maybe 25 feet.
So.
No.
Okay, well,
No?
while that is not completely off the mark,
Well, it's like 1,000 CFM. You know. We're good.
okay, hold on. Can I just defend my? I mean, I
Plus or
realize
minus
that I'm not.
10.
I realize I'm not trying to keep within tolerances that keep planes from crashing, or keep people from dying from infection, or keeping people from. There's Logan. He's actually he goes out on job walks with me. For those of you on the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah, and to be clear, for those of you not on the video, Logan is shirtless. I think he's wearing pants. It could be underwear. I'm not sure. Does he go out on the jobs like that?
He does. I mean, he's
Okay.
kind of a winner like that.
Got it.
All right, you're CNNing me right now. You need to go.
Okay.
Mwah. All right, is it bedtime? Is that what's happening? Okay. Good night. I love you.
Good
Bye,
night,
Logan.
Logan.
And at that point, this has totally gone off the rails. I apologize.
Yeah, you were schooling us on the importance of the difference between 999.8 CFM and 1,000.
So here's where I will defend my industry and the work that I do. Let's talk about operation rooms and chance of infections when you don't have the proper filtration in place. We've had this little thing maybe called a COVID that you might have heard about. I don't know if anybody's heard about COVID-19.
I've not. Could you elaborate?
Well, so there was this disease that kind of went through. It was pretty aggressive, and it caused some changes in how we operate. Anyway, that's been kind of a big deal in my industry, especially when you talk about filtration and bringing in fresh air. So I understand that you guys do some impressive things, but credit where it's
I
due.
don't. I'm a podcast host, but Rick apparently does.
But no, actually, I did kind of want to kind of highlight the importance of the things that all of us do and have done, because they are kind of critical and key. And even if it sounds like it's as fun as what Mander's done, is I'm sure what she does is critical to like preventing injury and comfort, and the ability to drive these vehicles. I'm going to let you talk. Why am I talking for you? I'm sorry.
Wait, were you giving it to me? Can I talk for her?
Maybe Rick wants to talk.
Sure.
Finish my story.
I don't think Rick
Go ahead.
does.
Go ahead,
Anders wants
Rick.
to pass
Go,
the
Rick,
mic.
Rick totally
wait, let's
got
go back
cut
to
off.
Rick. Let's go back to Rick.
So where was I? No, so essentially
All right,
I
this is
stumbled,
where
I
the
totally
podcast gets
stumbled
good.
on medical device manufacturing. There was no biomed at Cal Poly. That was not heard of. That was 2000. That did not exist, and I came into medical device manufacturing, and we made devices that save people's lives. And I've worked throughout the whole organization, from deploying help. I guess I've stayed mainly in the heart care, so deploying the left ventricular lead in a bi-V pacemaker was the startup that I worked at. We made a device that helped deploy the lead into the left side of the heart. And then I went to a company where we did RF ablation. We used they what they call generated plasma to remove tissue. They treated spinal problems, and the division I was in was an ENT, so we did tonsils and adenoids. Kids could recover within a couple of days by using this product. The cool thing about that one is I worked in Costa Rica. So I flew to Costa Rica about once a month, transferring information down to the engineering down there.
Just for those of you not watching, Sean is doing air quotes right now, transferring information down.
Yes, John.
Did they ever let you do one of the heart surgeries?
I went in and actually watched a bi-V pacemaker put in. Yep.
Did you?
They took me into the OR and like the cath room, and we had full-on lead, these massive lead things on because they're running fluoroscopy, and they rolled a guy in, and they're like, "How you doing, Fred?" And he's like, "I'm good. I'm cool." And they're like, "Oh, okay, we're going to just start cutting into you now." And it was, they said, "Keep your knees bent," was the trick. Because
Well, hey, no pressure, Fred. But you straighten out your
they
knees.
talked through him. They talked to him the whole time. It was amazing. They put.
That is amazing. So he's conscious the whole
How
time.
you doing? I'm doing good. They're like, all right. And at the end, they take control of the pacemaker and they hit a button, and you see it flatline for a moment, and then the pacemaker takes back over and doop, doop, doop. So they actually,
Wow.
I mean, stood there and watched the guy die for like 3 seconds. I'm like, all right, it worked. Good job. So
Now, what was really interesting about the last 30 seconds there is, as you're describing the pacemaker, oh yeah, they switch them over and you see it flatline, doop, 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 and on the third doop, the light in Rick's garage went off, as if on cue.
I planned that all out. It's all with like that PLCs going on in the background.
He's got the remote in his hand.
So
Oh my gosh. Well,
been in med device for
okay.
a long time. I really enjoy it. We save, the company I'm at right now, we save a ton of lives every day. And I've got 12 engineers that report to me, and it's great. We find problems that that's all we do. I'm like, come to me with your problems.
Well, and so I think to bring it back here for a moment, that if there's a common theme with engineers. I know one of my challenges over the years, even though I've worked in companies that make really impressive products, sometimes it's hard to see the impact of your work. And that's probably a topic for a whole nother podcast. We can have a whole conversation about that. But I mean, I think there's an important message there for people that maybe want to go into engineering or that are in it now, or maybe they've just graduated and they're trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? This isn't what I thought it was. I mean, here's 4 people, and we've gone through, I mean, I think people know a little bit about me. We've gone through a little bit of what you 3 have done. 4 people that if you just told somebody what your title was and where you were working, it probably would sound very innocuous. But as Eric pointed out, you know, it's the details. It's the, well, yeah, but what about that air exchange in the operating room? And I've experienced that. I mean, when I was doing Y2K testing back in 1999, for those of you younger viewers, you can Google year 2000. I was going through the hospitals and into all the different sections, and yeah, it turns out air exchange is a big deal. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm pretty sure that sitting in that simulator with Amanda almost 20 years ago, I saw some technology that now is on the vehicles sitting in my garage, well before it was there.
You absolutely did.
And Rick, one of the most exciting, yeah, I remember, Rick, you telling me about the, I can't remember if it was AEDs or the automatic CPR machine, or maybe you've worked on both, but I've seen both of those out in the world. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we're engineers. We solve problems, and we all take different paths, and it's interesting the paths we've taken. But now here we are, 4 fun, cool cats having a chat on the podcast. Okay, that's where we're going to leave it for episode 11. And from 4 cool cats to 2 cool cats, Eric is still here with us to wrap things up.
Going from the podcast to the pod cart.
What the hell is a pod cart?
I don't know.
I think that was definitely the Jameson talking.
Yeah, well, yeah. My lame attempt at a joke.
or you hadn't done your warm-up exercises. Rex likes to do warm-ups before. His mom, actually, I don't think we've talked about this on this show. His mom was a vocal coach, I think he said.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so every now and then you might catch an outtake where he's,
You know what? I think one of the episodes, we did catch a little bit of that.
I was struck in this episode by how all in each of us is with what we do and what we produce. You know, I kind of made that joke about the tape measure versus the tight tolerances that Rick has, which was not intended to be a slight on the importance of anybody's roles, but actually it turned out to be a great segue into how it's difficult sometimes to appreciate the impact when you're kind of behind the scenes the way we all are.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all in, pretty different industries, and we all have our own specific roles to do, but ultimately all the things we're doing are important in different ways, and kind of to your point, it's fun and entertaining to kind of hear about what each of us does and how that affects society at large.
Well, and I think from a personal perspective and a personal career perspective, it's important for people that are in roles like we are to figure out how you're going to cope with how how your impact is measured. I'll give an example. I helped out a team when I was working for Boeing. I facilitated like a value stream workshop. They were looking at replacing their manufacturing execution system. And so we mapped out their process and had great conversations with all the subject matter experts. And when it was all said and done, as I do as a matter of practice, I composed a white paper summarizing the event and everything that came out of it. And I sent it off to the managers of the area. And I just kind of assumed that, you know, they were probably going to look at it and throw it in the trash, because some of the things we uncovered were not in line with what they believed they needed to go do.
Okay.
And to my surprise, I was walking through the factory like a year later and bumped into somebody that had been in that event. And he stopped me and he says, "Hey, I've never seen anybody put a white paper together like that before. You know, why'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, that's just how I complete an event." He goes, "Well, they changed course based on the report that you wrote."
That's awesome.
Nobody ever told me.
Yeah.
And I would not have known had I not bumped into him. And I just assumed that they read it and ignored it. But it turns out I had an impact.
That's great. I mean, you've got to feel good, like, oh, hey, you know, what I'm doing, like, really makes a difference. And people noticed and cared.
Right. Right. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm not really a person that, you know, I didn't need a medal. I didn't need a participation trophy or anything like that. But part of my intrinsic motivation is that recognition that, yes, I had impact and influence.
Sure. Yeah, that's very cool.
Well, speaking of impact and influence, this episode has a new jingle thanks to you.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, in full transparency for the listening audience, at the time that we're recording this, I actually have not edited the jingle together. But you will find out in the next episode that Eric James has a history in the barbershop quartet realm. And so we asked him to put that to use for us. And now we've got a little Distracted Driving podcast jingle.
That should be a treat for everyone, including me. I won't be embarrassed at all.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this is you haven't even heard it yet.
That's right. Yes. Surprise.
I mean, you were there.
Yeah.
So
I was 3 or 4 Jamesons in at that point, so I was only partially there, but I was there.
All right. Well, that's probably enough for episode 11. I think Rex will be back next time. If not, we'll call Eric and have him jump into the driver's seat again. But until then, thanks again, Mr. Eric Leonard James, for pinch hitting.
Thanks for having me here, and thanks Rex for taking some time off so I could, you know, again be in front of a microphone.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Distracted Driving Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. It's the Distracted Driving Podcast, throwing out the status quo. Roll call! Sean! Rex! It's the Distracted Driving Podcast, throwing out the status quo.